War is immoral. Poverty is immoral. Racism is immoral. Police brutality is immoral. Oppression is immoral. Genocide is immoral. Imperialism is immoral. This country represents all those things. All those things. All those things. All those things.
And in your state, sounds about right. Whether it's books, abortion, being trans or unhoused, providing mutual aid, or mailing in election ballots, one by one, our rights are being stripped away. And for most Americans, it was never much of a democracy anyway. My global warning guest this week is the brains behind the Banned in Your State Substack, documenting the American apocalypse. She's also a freelance journalist with bylines in the New Republic, New York Magazine, Politico, and Rolling Stone. A heavily sought out expert on military intelligence, conservatism, and far-right movements, Laura focuses today on the end times and what's bringing it upon us. And she doesn't just write from home. Laura was injured at a protest, hit by a projectile fired by federal law enforcement while covering a gathering in downtown Portland. Recently, she also covered the anti-ICE protests in LA, documenting for The Nation what she saw wasn't an insurrection, but a police riot. For Banned in Your State, she wrote a guide this summer to fighting a military coup. On episode 5 of Global Warning, I speak with Laura Jedeed about combating this military coup, the pros and cons of the growing protest movement and the government response, and how it compares and contrasts with the Black Lives Matter movement, the rise of the far right since Charlottesville, the new fascist playbook, and how mainstream and social media distort the truth and aid Trump in implementing Project 2025. If you're listening, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. For exclusive benefits, become an official member. Laura, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Thank you. For anyone who heard the dogs in the background, it took us a few minutes to even get started. I'm starting to think maybe I should introduce them to everyone so it just becomes part of the show. Moving on, let's start with that military coup. What does it look like, and what do we as everyday folks have in our artillery to fight back?
Yeah, well, it's certainly a dark time watching ICE ramp up their abductions. Obviously, they've now gone to North Carolina, but they're active in a lot of places. You know, in my own neighborhood, there were several abductions last night. We expect that to continue here. I think all around the country, we're seeing this. We have now kind of reached just an ambient level of horrible acts of violence that just kind of happen all around us. And I think it's very easy to get numb to that. But there are things that we can do. And I think one of them, these things, it's going to be a long fight, but the first part of it always is going to be finding your people and just getting a group together to do something, to do morning walks in your area to see if ICE is setting up anywhere, to distribute whistles so that people can alert people, to impede, throw sand in the gears, whatever one has to do. And these things take time to ramp up, but unfortunately we're in it now, and we have to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it is what we're doing in some places. I think it's interesting, the whistles and the other community-based communication methods. A lot of people think this is brand new, but it's been happening for generations in a lot of communities. And that's something that I like to point out, and others point out, that for many of the individuals in this country, this isn't anything new. What's making it so newsworthy is that it's, as you said, almost ambient at this point. It's nonstop, and it's affecting everybody. There are big tent groups like 50501, and there are benefits to them. But are they coordinating with local on the ground groups who know and have long worked in their communities?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. Probably not, would be my guess. But I also think that's okay. I think that we can have a lot of different groups working towards the same goal, and that the strategies aren't going to necessarily look the same. I know people who have never in their lives been to a protest, who went to their first protest on No King's Day in October. Listen, is No King's Day going to be enough to topple this regime? Absolutely not. Not even close, right? But it is very hard to ask people to go from I'm sitting on my couch to let's throw rocks or redacted. You simply can't. You got to ramp it up. You got to get people used to the idea that they can say no to the government, that they're not helpless in the face of an authoritarian coup.
Really well said. Absolutely. Um, you've witnessed the 2025 protests, and you were there in 2020 as well. I remember my aunt saying, "You've been saying Black Lives Matter for a decade or something. Now I get it." So I remember then too, it was the first time for a lot of people. And, no matter how long people are doing it, some people just aren't going to throw rocks. Some
Yeah.
people are not physically able to leave the home. So there are so many different ways, as you pointed out, that people can get involved. What similarities are you seeing in the ways we're protesting, the ways we're performing mutual aid, or the ways the government's responding and instigating between the two movements? I guess we can say the two largest movements we've seen over the last 5 years. Any differences as well?
I mean, I think definitely. I think one of the biggest differences, and I think you just alluded to this, is that it's ambient now, and that means that you can't just be like, "Oh, it's those guys over there." Like, that's really too bad. It's too bad that the Black community is getting murdered on a really regular. That's too bad. But I'm sure we can legislate this. Whereas, when you start to see these videos every single day in various neighborhoods of just people getting dragged out of their homes, and it's just ambient like this, it's like very hard to be like, well, vote 2026. Like, I'm hearing that a lot less, and that's interesting too because I feel like in some ways the 2020 Black Lives Matter movement was much more radical, and I think it's like obvious on the face of it how much more radical it was. We haven't seen a lot of police precincts burned down this time around. However, what I didn't see in 2020 was what I saw at No King's Day in Chicago, which was a several speeches given by mainstream politicians like the mayor of New York, senators, House of Representatives, where voting came up one time in one sentence as an afterthought. I didn't see any big mayors calling for general strikes. I didn't see the kind of rhetoric we're seeing. I think that because the threat is so much more immediate to so many more people, it is radicalizing at a faster rate. And like, obviously, it's not okay. It's not good that that's what it took. It's really, we could have really avoided a lot of this trouble if people had taken this more seriously than what was just happening to marginalized groups, instead of that marginalized group thing expanding ever more rapidly. But here we are, and I'm seeing things that make me hopeful.
Yeah, totally. And those are really good call outs. It seems like the op is stronger now than ever. I wish we had realized before. As a Jew, I was born to fear something like this, and I was saying we should either start fighting it or start moving a while ago. And instead, we're here, and we are fighting, but I'm wondering and worried that maybe they're winning. With all the eroding civil liberties, what concerns you most?
Um, that's a really great question. There's a lot. I am concerned almost all the time. Despite my little message of optimism there, the truth is in my everyday life, I don't always feel that. Um, Something that is odd that concerns me. I don't know if this is the thing that most concerns me, but it's the thing that's on the top of my mind right now. Is that it seems like Trump is losing control of the Republican Party, and that's great. That's fantastic. It seems like there's a lot of schisms. What worries me is I think people are sleeping on the fact that MAGA really isn't Trump. Like, there's a lot of people who are like, well, it didn't happen without him. He's the charismatic leader. He's holding it all together. When he goes, it goes. That's not the case. That's not true. Like, the energy that he has unleashed is here to stay. And now we have, liberals very seriously being like, is Marjorie Taylor Greene on our side? Meanwhile, Marjorie Taylor Greene is out here being like, you should get Nick Fuentes on your show. Like, what are we? People are just, there's like blind spots to the kinds of danger that are here because people are so hyper focused on Trump, and I mean mostly liberals, let's be real, but hyper focused on Trump to the point where they're going to miss things like okay, so National Socialism isn't socialism. We know this. It is a thing that happens because of capitalism, and it is a thing that happens to serve the interests of the capital owning class. However, the socialism in their name isn't an accident. They're very good at appearing socialist. They've always been good at that. They've always been good at populist rhetoric. The fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Nick Fuentes and a few other people I could mention are advocating for things like universal health care, that does not make them friends. That is completely compatible with Christian nationalism. And I really worry that people aren't going to get that till it's too late.
Oh, perhaps your best point yet. That's a huge issue. Yeah, Trump could disappear and nothing would change as far as the threat. Are there specific individuals or groups on the right, not including Trump, that you feel represent the greatest threat?
Um, yeah, I think it's the tech billionaires and their alt-right brethren. I think that there's a there's a symbiosis there where the tech billionaires, I mean, they're unpleasant. Nobody really likes hearing them. Like, they've got their little cult. And the alt-right's also unpleasant, but in a different way. But I feel like they've got the infinite money glitch plus the manipulative hatred thing that I feel like JD Vance embodies. Like, people are like, oh, he's a charisma black hole. He can't get voted in. Well, he doesn't need to get voted in. He's there. He's already there. He's there till 28. And they control the army and a secret police service that is now the 10th best funded military in the world. So that's JD Vance is my number one concern, frankly.
Okay, great answer. And I can certainly relate. It worries me that the tech bros are there to provide the financing for people whose ideology supports their continued growth financially. It seems like the right thus isn't just better armed than the left, they're also better organized. Why do you think that is, beyond financial support, as we are not actually funded by Soros, but they do have that type of funding? And actually, what could we learn from them to build solidarity among the poor and working class?
Yeah. So I just want to open by saying something that I've encountered that's very funny to me. And I report in the conservative movement. I talk to a lot of conservatives. I have over the years. And something that you hear over and over again in these circles is, why can't we be organized like the left is organized? Why are we always infighting? Why are we always at each other's throat? It's very funny. And I'm always just like, listen, it's very funny. We have discussions. They're always very surprised actually to hear that the left has similar concerns, but that's because they flatten this into a symbol. Everyone to the left of Mitch McConnell is a communist. But with that being said, I do think that one of the problems is that the right wants to harken back to a fake past that never was, which is a unifying vision. Like, I mean, it's a hallucination, but it is a unifying vision, and they can all kind of make up whatever past they like the best and kind of gloss over the differences between their visions until it's too late for whoever is left out in the cold. Whereas the left is trying to imagine a future that never was, and that's actually much harder. And so when people have differences in what they believe that future should be, sometimes I think it's a lot more stark and a lot more obvious, and there's a tendency to get bogged down in fighting. It's tough balance, because you don't want such a big tent that you let the Nazis in, and also you don't want such a small tent that anyone that isn't completely in lockstep with me, we're not even going to talk. Like, that's a huge problem, and I do see signs that that's getting better. I do think that having a common enemy is helpful. That's it's a basic tenet of fascism, but the reason that works for them is because it works generally. When we have a common enemy, we band together. I think that's happening right now. And I also, I hope that maybe seeing the fallout of what happens when we don't talk to each other and we don't get along and we do get bogged down into things that genuinely don't matter very much at this point, what happens to us. So I think we're already seeing it. And I also think that we are seeing that getting the will of the people, to use a rather hackneyed phrase, can be more valuable than money. I mean, Zoran Mamdani was outspent by just unbelievable amounts, just unbelievable. But what he had is an army of volunteers who are willing to do it for free. And that, to me, is the template for how we do this going forward. We don't actually need tech billionaires. The fun thing about it is when inequality gets to a certain point and most of us have nothing, I don't know, money kind of stops mattering quite as much.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great point. What about what we see on our screens? How do the government and media collude to continue to manipulate people into thinking that making America great again isn't based on some fake past that never existed? And how do we counteract what is dividing the poor and working class? You talked about how inequality, the more extensive it gets, the more we have to rally around, but I'm still seeing a huge right left divide.
Yeah, no, it is God. I didn't actually come on intending to be optimistic, because mostly I'm not right now. But the fact that the institutions around us are crumbling as drastically as they are, I think actually is really good. I think that the media complicity, a lot of it in whitewashing things and also just kind of running cover for oligarchs, is becoming much more apparent, because it's becoming much more hard to do. The more egregious things get, and the more you get, these these, New York Times running articles about whether women ruined the workplace, stuff like this. It's becoming very obvious right now. ABC offered Trump millions of dollars in bribes, and now he's threatening to revoke their license, whatever that means. It's just, I feel like there's so much that's more out in the open that people are beginning to be like, wait a second, like, why is this? And, going back to No King's Day protests, look, again, No King's Day isn't going to topple the Trump government, but it did make a lot of people go, hey, I was at this protest with like 100,000 people. Why didn't I see that on my local news? Like, what was that? And I think people are starting to ask questions. And I do think that encouraging those questions is important. And, like, this is obviously a very self-serving thing I'm about to say, but I think independent media is a good way out. And that's not just, like anybody. Look, I got my start doing this because I was at a 2020 protest and they started arresting journalists, and I took out my phone and started live tweeting. Like, that's the basis for my entire career. And you can do that too. Anybody watching this, you can also do that. Like, the ivory tower is not necessary. You can come down from it. So that's not like a thorough answer to everything you said, but that's what I got.
I hate the dogs barking, but I love what you just said. So what recommendations beyond going out and doing it yourself, which is great advice, and you're one of many people who created a career not even knowingly by just being out there and being a citizen journalist and documenting. You mentioned independent media. What recommendations do you have for people looking for the truth, if anything, beyond that? Where should people go to get the news? And it's independent media, but maybe you have a couple you want to call out. And then where should we go for tactical and strategic advice? I would say that often that's not a typical, even independent paper, but certain groups are creating toolkits and things like that. Do you have any recommendations for those listeners unsure of where to go?
Yeah, let me try to think about this. So mainstream media, the one that I look at every day is Wired. It's not that they're perfect. They've had some stuff that I don't think is good, but when they're good, and it's most of the time, they've broken so many stories. They are really, I think they have their finger on the pulse of things because so much of this is tech pro focused. Speaking of which, I think Gil Duran's The Nerd Reich, which, like, by the way, Gil, I am so mad at you for coming up with that name. It's the best name anyone's ever come up with, and every day I'm furious at you for it. But it's great. I think that's a really good way to keep track of the oligarchs, which I think is something that, because it's so astounding what's happening with Trump, it kind of falls off the radio, radar. Zateo, I think, is great. There's a lot of them, right? There's a lot of very good independent media out there. Ken Klippenstein is another one. I think you can't, I don't know. He breaks stories that people aren't covering. That's one of the last things I'd ever give up reading. What people can do as far as tactics? I think that you look at a lot of these cities that have already gone through occupation, like Chicago has done a lot. Chicago, like a lot of big cities, but, Chicago especially has a very long history of activism. And I think that they've been able to translate that into action. And I don't think there's, for, I think, obvious reasons, there's not like a single domain that you should go to find that. But I think that if you start kind of looking, that's a good way to find it. If you're looking to get involved in your area, look for a film club, look for, like the DSA in my area has a running club. I'm in New York City, so our DSA is doing some pretty cool stuff right now, and they have a running club. Go running, go whatever it is that you do. Find something that's interesting, that's vaguely, and I guarantee you, the people that you meet in these groups are going to be able to help you get wherever you want to go. It really is. You got to there's a little bit of a soapbox here, and I apologize, but our mythology nationally is superhero movies, and we have this idea that in order to change the world, we need to be Superman, and that's how we do it. We have this one individual who does it all, and it's very easy to get depressed because that's not how it works. You don't have to do it all. You just have to do a little bit in your area, and if we all do that, well, maybe things can change.
I love that. And yeah, you're right. Whether it's running or reading or watching films or having bake sales or doing mutual aid, there are so many different types of groups that gather and demonstrate the benefits of community organizing, community thinking, community defense, privacy, etc. We're at the end here, so I want to end on a personal level, not personal to you necessarily, nothing you have to eke about sharing. Let's say you were to have a conversation, and my guess is you probably have, with a Proud Boy or Oath Keeper, for example, or even a racist relative. How do we appropriately address conflict at the interpersonal level? What would you say?
Yeah. No, this is something that I do a lot. And I think that the first thing is, obviously, if it is unsafe for you to talk to somebody, don't. You don't owe anybody any of your time. If you're a little bit tired and you don't want to do it, don't. You do not owe anybody. But if you want to, which I think is a good thing to do if you have the energy and it's safe for you, what I usually will do is I will try to find common ground. And there is usually common ground somewhere, even if you have to dig pretty deep, even if the common ground is, I too don't want to be poor, or I too think that, the healthcare system that we've got is really bad. I don't like Obamacare either. It's not working out for me very well either. Stuff like that. If you can drill down to however low you have to get to some kind of common ground, and then just kind of work your way out from there. Like, you're not going to get to the end of this in one conversation. I think ideally what you do is you get somebody to go, I hadn't thought about that before. That's a huge win. And if you can't do that, even getting them to walk away being like, well, she wasn't that bad. I guess she was pretty nice. Like, what I feel like my bare minimum thing that I aim for is that when this person goes out into the world and the next time they hear someone go, all Democrats are terrorists and we should throw them all in jail, I want them to be like, well, but Laura was okay. Like, and it's not much. It's so small. But, we got to, again, realistic expectations. And over time, I think that can become something.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'll just conclude by saying that this is a recommendation to people who mostly look like me. If I were a woman, I would be much more cautious about this. If I were a Black person, I would understand. It's certainly not an ask of me that I should go and have these conversations. Someone who looks like me, who often is mistaken for a Nazi, and I couldn't be less one, I'm the one who needs to have these conversations. And I do when I feel like it's safe. Laura, thank you so much for coming on today. Everything was illuminating. Listeners, if you're on, be sure to like, comment, and share. Subscribe for exclusive benefits. Become an official member, and be sure to follow Laura wherever she is on Blue Sky, and other places. But it's as simple as a Google search. She's got her own website. And if you're a publication, I highly recommend you reach out to her. Don't make her do the pitching. This episode was sponsored by Zevo Life Superfood, Good Feels Cannabis Seltzer, Shimmerwood CBD-infused seltzers, exclusive discounts using code WARNING. Link in video description. Thanks again, and we'll see you for episode 6.
War is immoral. Poverty is immoral. Racism is immoral. Police brutality is immoral. Oppression is immoral. Genocide is immoral. Imperialism is immoral. This country represents all those things. All those things. All those things.